up, internet? The GM said he had a really cool, exciting session for us with a really cool, unique, interesting monster. And everyone's like, oh, that's going to be exciting. And then we got about halfway through the session and we realized it was the false Hydra. And we all got kind of bored because, like, we've heard too much about this crap at this point. And, like, everyone knew what to do about it because everyone's heard the story about it. And now you're just kind of bored. And now you want new monsters. So Wizards of the Coast said, we got you. We have new monsters.
They said, hold my beer.
Yeah.
Did you also watch that Jacob video? Is that why you're bringing up the false Hydra?
I did watch that XP to level 3 video. Yes.
I literally, okay, I'm not saying this because I'm a joyless hipster, but I am. I've never thought the false Hydra was cool. I always like,
okay,
I was always like, this is kind of dorky.
I'm glad you said it first because I've also never thought it was cool.
It's kind of dorky. Like, I'm sorry. I don't make the rules. I just work here and enforce them with lethal intent. You know what I mean?
You know what it is? You know what it is? It's not that it's not cool. My problem with the false Hydra is it's a great idea for a story. It's not going to work in a tabletop game.
Yeah, like, it just
It just really doesn't. I mean, I shouldn't say not gonna. There's probably an equation out there to make that shit work. Like, there's probably a method. But like Jacob pointed out in the video, it kind of relies on you weirdly gaslighting your players, and like, it's just funky. Like, I just don't see a scenario where it's gonna work that well. It's kind of like the thing where you want to do the thing where a player like betrays another player, but that's really hard because you have to get this like buy-in, and you and the GM have to coordinate with the GM to do the secret thing. Like, it's tricky, right? So it's like the false Hydra requires a certain degree of coordination, and also the player's not getting mad, right? Because you're like, you turn around and you don't remember there being a person there. And the player's like, well, I as the player do. It's like, yeah, but your character doesn't. Like, you have to play along with that, you know?
You do, honestly. So I think I figured this out because I did a thing in my own campaign. I did the like,
so presumptuous of you.
Well, because it worked. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I think trying to gaslight your players, that's not going to work. Like, clearly. So I had a thing in my game where the players were going down the recursive hallway, and like, you know, they ran into the same, like, the time loop hallway, basically. Okay. Just be upfront and just be like, you out of character understand this is a time loop. You just kind of have to play along. Like, you're like, hey,
yeah. You have to get the upfront buy-in. It's like the character secret thing. Like, don't ask me about my edgy backstory. The only way that actually works is if the player characters know to some degree that you have an edgy backstory and how to bring it up. Like, because if you have an edgy backstory, but the other players do not know anything about it, then they're not going to be able to bring it up in character in any way, right? So somebody has to know. At the very least, the GM needs to understand to some degree, and you could try and do the cool reveal thing, but you got to kind of make a plan. Like, you can't just 100% organically whip that shit out there.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that was kind of a weird opening tangent, but it is relevant because we're talking about monsters. Before we talk about monsters, though, I don't know why I'm doing this. I think hit follow or subscribe on your podcast platform of choice.
Yeah. I think it's because your brain wants to do boss weapons, but you can't.
Boss weapons!
So Cardell was streaming Lunaseed, and in the Firelink area, there was a crow lady who pretty clearly is supposed to be a reference to Ornifex. And I was just like, is that the lady who sells a boss weapon? Yes. And then every time in my head I see her, I do boss weapons. Like, every time without fail.
Funny bird.
Orb.
I want my board.
I like Mickey Rourke. Well, people shit on Mickey Rourke as an actor. I like Mickey Rourke a lot.
I don't know him from anything other than Whiplash and Iron Man 2, so.
Fair enough.
So my one example of him is a strange one.
Fair.
Yeah. Anyway, so Wizards of the Coast has decided to grace us with their glorious, glorious game design once more. Well, sort of, kind of. The new monster manual, by the time you are hearing this, the new monster manual will be out in your friendly local gaming store in like 2 weeks. February 4th is the game store drop. And then February like 11th or 12th or something like that is the everybody else, standard drop. Which is to say, if you have a local game store near you, you can get it a little bit earlier than at like Target or Walmart. In case you didn't know, this is a thing. Anyway, so the monster manual is on the way very, very soon. So we've got some information about the monsters. So far, as of recording, we have the video titled Monster Manual Everything You Need to Know. And then we have the video that is Monster Manual Dragons and Monster Manual Undead. There are more videos coming that will be out after we're done recording. We're probably not going to bother talking about them for a multitude of reasons. One of those reasons being we already know what we're doing next week. One of the other reasons being they're probably not going to say that much more anyway. And one of the other reasons being it's going to be so close to the release, you'll just look at the damn book your damn self.
Yeah, all of those things.
Yeah, all those things. So... we'll just kick off into it, I guess. So the first video, Monster Manual, Everything You Need to Know, is the big, broad overview one. They did this for the Player's Handbook also. I think they did a DMG one, I'm pretty sure. These videos, as we have learned from the release of these 3 books, Jawcraw is the patron saint of the crawfish is very good at getting you excited about the briny deep. But sometimes he's overselling its salty goodness a little too much. So there's things they say. Crawfish aren't even saltwater creatures.
They're not.
I just realized after I said that, I was like, I'm thinking of shrimp. It's not the same thing. Anyway, the point being, the crawfish preacheth interesting things, but sometimes he oversells it a little bit, and it's not as exciting as it sounds. So if you watch the video, after listening or before listening or whatever, and you're like, that sounds really sick, temper your expectations a little bit, because 5e has a tendency to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It tends to be cool, but not as cool as you were thinking it was going to be and or hoping it was going to be. That's a thing 5e does a lot. So the opening sales pitch on this Monster Manual video is that everything in the book is new. Bold words, Jeremy. We'll see how that plays out. That is my response to that, because this is probably going to be one of those things where he is technically correct, but like everything is new could just mean the goblin had 16 HP and now it has 18 HP. That's new. That could be what he means. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
In a similar vein, they said the objective of the new Monster Manual book was to improve every monster. We'll see about that. We shall see about that. Because once again, if you just gave, the Displacer Beast a higher attack die, I guess that's an improvement in the strictest sense of the word. So, yeah. But this is kind of cool. Over 500 stat blocks in this new book.
That's impressive.
80 new monsters. Yeah. 80 new monsters, over 500 stat blocks. And in Crawford's words, and I'm pretty sure this is absolutely empirically true because I think he would get in trouble if he lied about this, it's the biggest monster manual D&D's ever had. So, now to be clear, he's probably saying the book itself, because some books throughout the history of D&D you can kind of smash together and consider a singular book. Obviously, those situations would probably have more than this particular monster manual, but this is the biggest singular monster manual. So that's cool. Over 580 new monsters is 80 is a respectable chunk, I would say.
Yes.
Like, and because, really, at the end of the day, 80 new monsters really, for most GMs that play D&D with any kind of regularity, really means 80 new stat blocks for me to rip apart into pieces and do other things with.
I wonder if they're the point of all the new, and we'll talk about this more later, is that they have a bunch of variants of monsters, is to maybe not, discourage is not the right word, but make that easier, make it so that we don't have to do that as much.
Yeah. So, yes. Not how would I phrase it? Like, yeah, I know what you're getting at. Like, this was a criticism of 5e early on, is that 4th edition had, Goblin and Goblin Tank Man and Goblin Shield Guy and Goblin Wizard Guy and Goblin Bow Guy. Like, there was a bunch of different kinds of goblins and different kinds of kobolds and different kinds of bandits, right? A lot of stuff where it was like, it's not just you have Goblin, right? It was like you had a bunch of variations within the stat block, because that lets you do lots of cool things make a cool encounter while only using a singular kind of monster. And 5e did that significantly less, right? Like in the original book, you had kobold and you had goblin, right? Eventually, and maybe goblin boss, I think, was in there. And then eventually you got, the kobold dragon shield and the kobold sorcerer, but those were like down the road. So yes, I think the idea is to give you variations on monsters so that you can continue to use them throughout more spans of the game, and yes, to make it easier to not necessarily have to hackery and fuck about just because you want to make a goblin wizard. Instead, they just made you a goblin wizard. So, yeah. They talked a lot about the new art, as they do with all of these videos. So, they said the new art now emphasizes all of the monsters doing something in their kind of territory. No more monster floating in white space. So what that means is, like, the art of the specter, for example, is like hovering over a person holding a lantern or whatever. So it's like the specter is doing a specter thing. The skeletons, the art for the skeletons shows like a bunch of skeletons fighting adventurers, right? No more monster in floating white background. I don't know about you. I have a little bit of a mixed opinion on this.
Yes, I do also have a mixed opinion. I would very much like to hear yours.
So, two main things. My first is actually three things, but the third one is only specific to a very small subset of people. My first main problem is, if all of the monster pieces are these bigger, the monster in a scene type pieces, I feel like statistically we're just getting less monster art, right? Like, we have to be getting less drawings.
You'd think.
Because they're taking up more space. You don't have more page, you know what I mean? Like, so that's my first problem. My second one, and this is a little more about how I GM and probably how other people GM, I would imagine too. If the monster's shown in a specific setting, right? The specter is shown in a graveyard haunting a person with a lantern. Your brain is going to see that and kind of default to, okay, that's what a specter does. That's where they exist. Whereas when they're floating in the white space, you have a little bit of more imaginative leeway to be like, oh, I can picture them in lots of different places because I know what the monster looks, but I don't have any kind of scene. I just have the monster. That gives me a lot of mental space to put them in other places. Whereas when they're already drawn in a scene, my default is now locked into that first scene I saw them. Now, obviously you can ignore it, but it's an extra mental step. That makes sense?
Yes.
Okay. And then, as I said, my third one, which is a lot more niche of a complaint. If you're an artist and you wanted to work for Wizards of the Coast, your chances have gone down drastically.
Yes.
Because if you're an artist who's not as good, like myself, and you would like to do work for Wizards of the Coast, a monster floating in a white space with no scenery is sort of an easier job for you to, like, if you're a freelancer, that's an easier, lower paying job that you could use to get your foot in the door. If they're not doing that anymore, go fuck yourself, I guess. That's why I said that last one's kind of a very specific complaint, but you see what I mean.
I do, yes. So I have a different, but ultimately similar thought process, which is I kind of like monster on background, which sounds crazy because it's less interesting, but I like it in this looks like something that was like a scientific sketch. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It feels
it doesn't look like a photo that was taken.
Exactly, yeah. And I prefer that because it's cool to have those scenes in there as supplementary art, but on some level it's just a little distracting for me. I don't know about you.
Well, that's kind of what I meant about it being that idea that seeing the monster in that specific scenery makes your brain always default to that scenery. Like it becomes a little bit harder to imagine them in other places.
Yes.
Like, for example, there's an art piece of an ancient brass or which ones are the swimmy guys? Bronze? Brass? Bronze. I think it's bronze. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Yeah. Copper? Could be copper. One of them. The ones that swim, there's a shot of one of them wrestling a megalodon, like fighting a big giant megalodon, which is like a cool scene, but it's underwater. So now my brain's like, this dragon always underwater, but they don't always have to be underwater, but you're going to kind of a default to that at first. And again, it's not like a huge deal. It's just a thing that it was just one of those things that I thought about. And I was like, huh, okay, interesting. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But I think there's just less space for art is the bigger problem.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm a little, like, if we get less art of monsters, I'm going to be a little annoyed about that. Because if there is any, like, if someone said to me, all right, you got to pick the player's handbook, the DMG, and the monster manual, right? One of them gets the most art and the other two have to suffer. I'm going with the monster manual. Easy choice. No question.
Oh,
like, for the one that I want the most art in, it's the monster manual. Easy.
Oh, never mind. Okay, that's what you thought. Oh, yeah. I agree.
Yeah. No, not the least. If I have to say one gets the most art and all the other ones have to suffer, the monster manual is getting the most art. The other two are suffering in my book.
I agree completely.
If that was my choice. So the fact that we might be getting less monster art is a little weird, especially because we got significantly more player's handbook art. Right? So
yeah, I mean, this will be real. This will greatly be stress testing the idea we got a bigger budget, because it's like now it gets the point of, all right, how big we talking?
The other thing too is that I guess this might be the other scenario is we're getting less text. Right? Because that's what happened.
Yeah.
That's what happened with the player's handbook. We got less text.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We got significantly less lore text on pretty much everything in the player's handbook.
Yes, which I was not a huge fan of.
Some of the places I was okay with it. Some of it I felt like it was too sparse. That might be happening with the monster manual too, which I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
I don't know either, because they pretty emphatically said that they were going to be rewriting a lot of the lore. And 5e was already pretty scarce on the lore.
Yeah. Well, given a comment they made later down the road, I don't know. We'll see. I put it in my notes, so we'll get to it. So that's the art situation. Crawfisherino mentioned all of the monsters will have default treasure in their stat block, or there won't be anything there if there is no particularly interesting loot on that monster. that sounds really cool. You're gonna be disappointed. Don't get excited about that statement, because the few stat blocks we have seen, it was not cool.
Yeah.
Because we saw like a bugbear stat block from a little while ago, and all it said for quote unquote treasure was a weapon and his armor. That was it.
Yeah.
And we just recently got a new stat block for a vampire familiar, and it says under gear, daggers. 10 daggers. That's it. So
many fucking
don't get
daggers,
excited,
dude.
Don't get excited about that statement. It's not going to be very exciting. Now, what will, I hope, be more exciting is because we have the treasure categories thing now, then you can do the thing where the monster, it says treasure and then it says armaments or relics or whatever, whatever those whatever the 4 categories were. I forget what they were. I know one of them was armaments. So that I'm hoping will be utilized more, but the gear on the stat block, don't get too excited about it. This is a spot where we disagree. I don't know that we really need to rehash this whole thing, but they mentioned multiple times in the Monster Manual video and the Dragon video, they kept talking about legendary actions. So legendary actions are back and are mostly untouched.
I mean, I will offer one summary, let's go, baby, and that'll be about it.
Yeah.
For the sake of civility, that's all I'm going to give it.
For those who don't know what I'm referring to, for a little while there, it was looking like they might take legendary actions out of the game in favor of giving, bigger, higher CR monsters just a whole bunch of reactions. So, for example, we saw an ancient green dragon stat block that I believe was leaked and wasn't supposed to be, and it had 5. It could do 5 reactions per round, and it had a large list of potential reactions that it could do based on various types of events. It's a reaction, so they all had a different trigger. That has been changed, or that was a thing they were. If you looked at the Vecna stat block that came out with the Vecna dossier, he didn't have legendary actions. He had 5 reactions. So they were toying around with that. They seem to have mostly abandoned that idea, or if either they abandoned it completely or just mostly abandon it and maybe we'll use it in a couple of places. I don't know. Personally, I was on the side of, I like the idea of using a large amount of reactions based on different kinds of stipulations. I feel like there is more interesting design potential there. Isaiah prefers the legendary actions, so it seems that Wizards of the Coast has sided with Isaiah in this one.
Victory in all things.
Long story short. There has been a little bit of change to legendary actions that we'll get to when we get to the dragons. So that's interesting. It's not a huge change, but it's a little bit of a change. So, speaking of legendary actions, so Crockerano said legendary actions have been redesigned and relooked at so that GMs can't make an unoptimal choice that would make the monster seem weaker. Because what he was saying, and I don't want to say I don't believe him, but this, I don't know, it seems a little odd to me, but basically what he was saying is that a monster at a given CR for certain GMs would feel weaker because the game master might choose to use a legendary action that is quote unquote unoptimal. So they didn't take the best option for the given scenario, and the monster felt weaker because they weren't choosing the optimal attack or whatever. So they have reworked legendary actions to make it so that there is no unoptimal choice, and they all should be, about the same level of effectiveness. I am highly skeptical of this working in practice.
Yeah, I had a similar thought of, how do you control that? Where is the math of that coming from?
I have no idea.
Like, So what he said actually made sense, right? The like, when we originally designed it, we had this philosophy in mind of, you know, these things would be based on X, Y, Z metrics.
And like playing the creature correctly, quote unquote. Yeah.
Yeah. So interesting. I don't think we actually knew that previously. I can't really understate how interesting that is. Like, that's just some hidden lore.
I think we knew that during the general, like, in this whole 2024 refresh. I think he has said that before, but prior to 2024, I don't think we knew that. I think. So yeah, it's some background lore for sure. I just don't understand how you could possibly set it up in such a fashion where like every legendary action is going to be the optimal choice.
Yeah, that I don't.
You know, especially because
they're going to square that circle.
Especially because here's the thing, right? So legendary actions, you can choose freely which one you use, right? Like player's turn ends, monster does a legendary action. You could choose whatever you want. If they went with the reactions, the multiple reactions mechanic, I would actually understand this idea a little bit more, because reactions have a specific trigger, so you can't do the wrong thing. You can only do the thing that triggers the reaction. So if they went with that design, I would get it. But they're sticking with legendary actions, so now I'm back to not being sure how that's going to work, because you can choose whatever you want. And there's going to be the more optimal action and the least optimal action. That's just going to happen.
Like always. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you can't uncouple those. It just not really how that works. You know what I'm saying? Like,
so what you've done, so you didn't go down they weren't called this, but you didn't go down the route of legendary reactions. You stuck with legendary actions. So I'm like, okay, so something that I feel like would have actually solved some GM issues, you didn't go with, but you're saying you fixed it in a different way. I'm not seeing how the fixed it in a different way is going to work. Mm-hmm. Now, we are going to pull up a sample stat block, and maybe by looking at it a little closely, something will come to us in the moment, but we'll see. So there's that. They mentioned a little bit more about the art, saying how a lot of the artwork shows different versions of monsters, all of them doing things relevant to their stat block. So the example being the Spectre being affected by sunlight is simpatico with the idea that they have a weakness to sunlight thing in their stat block. And also they were talking about how, for example, the performer's stat block, I think, has a picture of a bunch of different performers of different species to let you know, like, hey, this monster can be a bunch of different things, or that the mimic art has a bunch of art of different objects being mimics, not just a treasure chest. So, sure. Okay, cool. Yeah. Art good. Sure. Then the crawfish companion, who I actually don't remember what the other dude in the video's name was.
I feel bad. I also don't really
Yeah, he was a different designer, and I don't remember what his name was. But he mentioned backing off what he called the deep lore elements of monsters and opting for a basic overview instead. So basically what he was saying is, we don't want you to have to feel like you need to do homework to understand a monster. So we kind of took out some of the like heftier lore that was in the monster manual. This is the thing that's making me think, okay, so we're sparsing out on text. I don't know if you have any strong reaction to that.
No, this must sound boring to people listening, but like, these are all the exact same thoughts I had. Except for the sparsing out of text. That's the only one where I didn't actually think about that.
I think that's what he's saying. I'm not positive on that, but
yeah,
that's going to get a mixed reception, I'm sure.
Probably, yes.
Because I mean, for me personally, the text of a monster being sparser, I'm actually totally fine with, because I'm the kind of GM where if you give me a monster and give me literally one sentence about what that monster is, like just one sentence, I can make the entire monster based on one sentence. I'm fine with that. Like, I kind of already do that. I will look at the picture of the art of the monster and already start drawing conclusions and ideas and have a plan. So the idea of like the not having the super deep, chunky block of lore text next to the monster doesn't really bother me. But I know it will bother some people.
It bothers me because I actually really care about that lore. Like, I enjoy learning about monster lore. I find it interesting. So one of my biggest issues previously was that they changed a lot of the lore and they simplified it and they left a lot of really fun stuff out. That's why a lot of people like that's why a lot of people like YouTubers like Mr. Rex, who fill us back in on that stuff, you know?
Question though, do you only care about that lore because it's old and has existed prior? Like, if 5e was the first edition of the game, would you care if there was sparser lore on monsters?
No, I wouldn't, because that's as far as we're aware the most in-depth it gets. My issue is not necessarily that it's new lore, it's that it leaves a bunch of shit out.
Right,
you know, it's not that the lore's changed. I mean, in a lot of ways it is changed, but like, it's mainly that there is really interesting stuff like there's really cool lore from back in the day about how wizards use basilisk eyes and how they do that, or like, I don't know, the mating habits of mimics. Stuff that's like worthless information, but I find super interesting because it makes the universe feel lived in, and it feels like a monster manual, like a book someone wrote about who was chronicling these monsters like a biologist. And that stuff can be interesting, right? If you have an adventure about stealing a dragon egg, you might want to know about the mating habits of dragons, you know?
Sure. I mean, my counter would be I'll just make it the fuck up myself. But
yeah, you can't. Look, it's never a question of like, I can't do it because I didn't make it up. Right. It's never really the issue. It's that I want that information, not so that I don't have to make it up, but because it'll be more in line with what the designers had. You know?
You do somewhat understand though the problem therein, that if they keep preserving all of that lore, the lore continues to build and build and build and build and build, because the game is so fucking old that the monster manual will eventually be 3,000 pages, right? Like, you do see that issue.
Yes, I understand that the lore will build, and it can get a little wonky if it gets too much. But for example, the lore was like completely overhauled and changed for 4E.
Well, the lore has changed for every edition.
Well, so yes. So from like 1E to 2E, it was built on. From 2E to 3 and 3.5.
Well, that's because 1E doesn't really exist in a sense.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
But for the sake of this, I'm calling it 1E. For 3
right.
For 3 and 3.5, it was built on and changed, but given more in-depth stuff. In 4th edition, it was just completely different. Like, just different universe, different rules, nothing was the same. In 5.
Yeah, because you can't do
5E,
it forever.
No, you can't, but 5E went back to that earlier stuff and just left a bunch of shit out.
Sure.
That's really my issue, is that it just left a bunch of shit out. And like, you know, the changes they're making, and spoilers, they're turning goblins from humanoids into fae. That's fine. They're just going in line with what goblins actually were historically. But now that you've changed that lore, give me stuff for it. I want to know about it. I want to know everything you can think of about it. I don't want, if you take away, if to what you're saying, if they're taking that information away, well, that solves nothing. Now the lore is different and we don't got a lot on it. So what the fuck are we supposed to do now?
Well, I don't know exactly if they're taking it away or per se. I'm just sort of interpreting the statement. But the idea, I mean, well, the goblins thing specifically, I think the goblins have always kind of implied to be fae. It just wasn't like hard coded in the game. You know what I mean?
Potentially, yeah.
But yeah, like I don't know. It is also worth saying that you could also look up a lot of this, all this lore stuff really easily too, which I think they have taken the approach more recently that because all of this lore stuff exists easily, accessibly online, they don't feel the need to have to keep reiterating and reprinting it because you can find it yourself quite easily, you know?
You can. You can, yes. And for stuff that's old, like people still look at the Draconomicon from 3.5. And a lot of people go, yeah, that's fine. That works. But how does that old stuff like chalk up to the new stuff? You know what I mean? Like there needs to be a refresh and a relook at this stuff because it's important, at least in my opinion.
I guess, yeah. I don't know. I also think purely from a business sense, a very lore dense book I don't think sells as well, TBH.
You would say that, but look at Warhammer. Those codexes are $50 a pop, and a new one comes out every 4 months, and you best believe people will buy them.
Yeah, but the codexes are rules.
Well, they used to be more rules heavy. Now they're just becoming lore books, and people are still buying them.
But don't you still need them to play your faction if you get a codex? Yeah, like if a new codex for your faction comes out, don't you have to have it for the updated rules?
Let's put it this way. Old codexes were about 50-50, and granted, they're like 100-page books, about 50-50 between lore and rules. And people really liked those rules, the lore, because that's where the fluff was coming from, right? This is before the Black Library push on lore. So people were clamoring at that in the same way they are with 5e, where we don't have we have official lore stuff for 5e, but a lot of it's sort of self-referential. We don't have anyone specifically saying this is what happened when.
Right, I understand, but what I'm saying is Warhammer is a weird situation because if a new codex comes out for the army you play, it's not like optional for you to buy it. You have to buy it to make sure you have the correctly updated rules. So regardless of how much of it is lore or not lore, you still have to have it, you know? Like that's sort of fucking with the sales.
Well, yes, it is. And I suppose a more up-to-date comparison is that you can get the rules online now through the Warhammer app.
Without the lore, though?
Yes, and themselves? People are still buying the codexes in droves.
I mean, maybe. I don't know. Like, I don't know if that would. I don't know if that would work for D&D. I have no idea. My gut instinct says a 600-page thick tome of like lore shit with like 200 pages being rules would sell less. That's my gut on that.
Well, that's a huge disparity, though. Like.
Yeah, but that's, you know what I mean.
Well, but like that's like a 70-30 disparity. I would agree with you there. That's lore to the point of that's way too much. But right now, my dog is scratching at my door because he's bored. But if it was closer to like a 60-40, and I'm saying like 60% rules, 40% lore, I think that'd be fine. I think what we're probably looking at now is like, if what you're saying is correct, we might be looking at a 70-30 rules to lore. So it's 70% rules, 30% lore, and I want just more than that. This is a weird diatribe to go on, but
I mean, maybe, yeah, it might be that. We don't have enough information. I mean, the player's handbook was very sparse on lore. But the player's handbook is also kind of the player's handbook is the game rule book, right? Like the DMG teaches you how to run the game, but it doesn't actually teach you how the rules of the game work. The rules of the game are in the player's handbook. So that one's a little bit in a weird position. So relative to that versus the monster manual, I don't know. It's hard to say. We did get a lore we got a lore glossary in the DMG, but it wasn't hugely in depth. So there's that. We got the Greyhawk chunk, which was like pretty good. Like I felt like content wise, pretty decent. So, I don't know. I guess we'll kind of see how it divvies up. I might be totally off base. I may be mounting, mountaining a molehill, making you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
I was trying to adjust the saying and it didn't work. But
no, look,
yeah.
I really hope so too. And I'm hoping that with these extra pages on top of the variants that we're going to get for the monsters, which I also really want, we are just going to be getting more lore for those monsters, considering that a lot of changes that they've like championed lore wise are going to be different.
Maybe
like the thing with succubi, how they're two different things now and not just
succubus and incubus.
Yeah. Interesting that like they're sort of going with the idea that you can have a male succubus and a female incubus, so they're just going with the concubus route. I feel like they should just rename them to concubi because
I don't think that is what they're going with.
No, that's what they literally said. Succubi and incubi can present multiple genders.
Well, no, the stat block literally has an ability to change into the other one.
Well, yeah, so that's how they actually work in lore, is that a succubus can become an incubus,
right?
And vice versa.
That's what they can do. They have an ability that literally changes to, it says like the succubus says change into an incubus, the incubus says change into a succubus, like it's in their stat block. We've actually seen that stat block. Yes,
I know that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that they are different things now, right? Yeah. Like the incubi control dreams and succubi are physical. I want to see lore for that. I want to know what I want to see why that's different and how that plays out.
No, I know. I was responding to your they're going with the concube, whatever the hell you said, route. I don't think they are.
Well, that's the original Celtic lore for succubi. They were concubi that could become succubi or incubi. Concubi is just the gender neutral term for them. One would turn into the other.
This doesn't fucking matter. Never mind. It's not what you said originally, but it doesn't matter.
That's what I meant.
They did briefly mention that there will be the monsters will have a section that describes their tactics. So like telling you how to use the monster. Hopefully that's not just like one sentence that says like goblins attacking groups or something like that. Hopefully it's a little bit more than that.
You'd hope.
Yeah, but I don't know. They didn't specify. They just said there's going to be some monster tactics in the book. So we'll see what that means. I'm hopeful, but not too hopeful. Never too hopeful.
Yeah.
We're getting more new humanoid NPC stat blocks. No complaint. No notes on that one. Just good. And we're getting both new lower CR monsters and higher CR monsters to fill out the monster types that were lacking. The example they gave is vampires. So they talked about how there's a vampire, there's a lower CR vampire called a vampire familiar. And then we have a vampire spawn. And then there's the vampire. And then there's a vampire umbral lord. So now we get like 4 potentially different vampires. We're getting a new funny goblin wizard stat block called the Goblin Hexer. I'm happy about that. I like funny goblin wizard. Again,
apparently the Hexer is a callback to 4E.
Yes, that is what they said. Yeah. Goblins are Fey now. Gnolls are fiends. Many creatures are getting their typings changed. Kobolds are dragons. So a bunch of creatures are getting changed to humanoids because, quite frankly, 5e had too many fucking humanoids.
Quite a bit, yeah.
A lot of people are annoyed about this because it means like, but then I can't charm person the kobold, and I'm like, I'm okay with this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we will need to see some rules shifting to accommodate this, but
I mean, I don't think we do. Players are already more powerful in 2024, so I think this is okay that the monsters are getting some various buffs.
No, yes, but this is that thing where we were talking about, I don't know how long ago, that spells that are more than just do damage. Stuff like the charms are those spells, right? They're the narrative spells that can be really interesting in a roleplay setting. If you just de-incentivize using them, that's a huge issue.
Well, you de-incentivize using them in combat, but I still think they'll have plenty of other uses. You're still going to be doing with mostly humanoids when you're like chatting with people and stuff, right?
Assuming that you're not playing a more high fantastical game where like kobolds and goblins and shit are just townsfolk.
I guess that's true. Yeah.
Like something like Exandria specifically, right? Where like goblins are just, my neighbor's a kobold, my landlord's a goblin. Oh great, now I can't, because they just are a different monster type.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're gonna get any changes to the rules in that sense. I think they're just gonna change the creature types. But I don't know, maybe not. We'll see. I still feel like dual typing could have been an option, but
Completely agree. I was just about to fucking bring up dual typing. Yes.
Yeah.
I really wish they
could
had
have been an option.
Fucking put dual typing in.
Yeah. I don't know why they're afraid of that one, but whatever. They mentioned monsters are going to interact with the bloodied condition, and they're going to use exhaustion more.
Hey,
hopefully
you got what
it's
you wanted.
not. Well, as I put in the notes, hopefully it isn't just one or two monsters, and it's actually, a sizable chunk of them that interact with the fucking mechanic. Because sometimes D&D be like, we added this thing where monsters do X, Y, and Z, and they did it for like one fucking monster, and you're like, great, awesome.
I don't think they would do that to you.
They've done that to me before. In other ways. So I'm not getting too hopeful, but I hope. I have a little bit of hope that they'll do something cool there. We'll see. I think it's very funny that they specifically, Crawford called out the Tarask having an entirely new kit and has the ability to deal with the fly away with a magic bow problem.
Yeah.
I hope it's laser breath.
If it has an atomic breath, I will fucking cry. I want it so
bad. I know. I want it so bad.
I will bust the illest nut if it has an atomic breath. Yeah. Have you seen how big it is now? They've updated everything's size.
So they didn't actually update the sizes mechanically. They just updated the art to show the size.
Yeah. Yes. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
They upped its size in a narrative sense, and now the Tarask is exactly as big as I fucking want it to be.
I think it was always supposed to be that size. It was just never being depicted correctly.
Well, yeah, I mean, it never matched up to that mechanically because size gargantuan is 4x4 or whatever.
Well, but so this is the funny thing. They literally called it out in this video. Or no, it might be the dragon video, actually. Gargantuan does not have a max, and it never has. So it doesn't have to be 4x4. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it's not like this is a new rule. Gargantuan has never had a size ceiling. People just thought it did for some reason.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's what I'm saying. So the idea that the Tarask is it never worked out that way. It's but it could. You just chose not to make it big enough. You know what I mean?
Well, I don't think it's a choose thing. People just look at it and go, oh, well, it's supposed to be that big. So that's how big they are typically. That's how big it is.
Yeah, it's not a choose. I guess maybe the book just never described it properly. I don't know. But Crawford literally said in the dragon video, Gargantuan has no max size. There's no ceiling. So the art of they were talking about the dragon turtle is fucking gigamongous huge, stupidly massive.
Yeah.
It's showing it eating a tiny little, what looks like probably a galleon, and it's the size of its fucking tooth, Mm-hmm. So it's it is stupidly large. So I think the Tarask was supposed to be that way. It just, people didn't use it that way.
Yeah.
But yes, God, I wanted to have atomic breath so bad.
I want you to know if it does. I don't care what I'm doing. The next campaign I'm in, I'm going to run it. And you're just going to go, and you enter its lair, and then it's going to do the...
Yes.
I'm just going to look at me and go, are you really doing that?
I would expect
but with my
else.
mouth this time. Yeah. I'm just going to be this dick.
It's okay. So they also, another thing of note, each monster has a little 2 or 3 word description next to their name. So the example they gave is the skeleton says ossified evil. I had to look up what ossified meant because I was like, that's a new word. Having turned into bone or bony tissue.
Yeah. I did actually know what ossified means.
Yeah.
Your trick is ossified, fossilized. That
makes sense.
They're not exactly the same, but
I thought of osteoporosis.
that's a fair thing. Yeah, the ossia.
Yeah. Almost certainly the same prefix from Latin, I'm sure.
Yes.
But anyway, so every monster has one of these little short 2 to 3 word descriptors. I really, really love these. They don't necessarily do anything. I just love shit like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like Dungeon World did a similar thing, and it just gives my brain juice something to like latch on to. I love that shit. It's so sick. It does nothing, but I love it. Most people are not going to fucking care, but I care.
See, that's me with the lore. I care.
I mean, yeah, no, I wasn't saying you're not allowed to care. This I loved. So in the back of the book, there's going to be a bunch of different lists organized by different methods. So there's a list of monsters by CR, monsters by creature type, monsters by subtype. Yes, God, thank you. Fucking thank you. Because the immediate follow-up, the entire book is alphabetical, right? So the example they give is if you try to look up Pit Fiend, it's going to be under P instead of D. It's going to be under P for Pit Fiend instead of D for Demon, right? Because in the 2014 Monster Manual, Pit Fiend is under D for Demons. But because, and we've mentioned this multiple times, a big part of 2024 is to be more approachable to new players who are new to the hobby. And when we say new players, we're talking 100% new, have never heard of a D&D in their life. What's a D&D? Is that a thing the kids are doing on the street? It's easier for them to say, oh, a Pit Fiend? Where's that? And then look at the P section of the alphabet. Then know that a Pit Fiend is a demon looking D. If they didn't have those lists in the back, that would be a little annoying. But because they have all of those lists in the back that have them by stuff like creature type, you can look at all of the monsters that fall under demons and just say, Pit Fiend is under the demons. Okay. So they basically gave a best of both worlds. I'm very happy about that.
I am too. This is literally what I complained about with spells, right? We're getting.
Yes.
This is just
well,
W.
they kind of did that with spells. they made
did,
it so
yeah.
all
What
the
I'm saying
spell lists
is,
are
like,
on the class.
This is the same thing that I bitched about with spells, where it's like I need them alphabetical by spell number. This is just the equivalent.
Yes. Honestly, I will say probably one of the biggest upgrades for all of the 2024 books
is its fucking organization.
Is the organization? Yeah.
Oh, it's so good.
They're all like substantially better organized, which is really funny because I'm not someone who uses the physical books ever. So like, why do I give a shit? But like, it's still better.
Yep. I get you. I agree. It's good.
One of the biggest things I loved about the DMG is that the order of the chapters makes so much more fucking sense now.
It's so
crazy.
Nice.
Crazy. I thought this was a fun little thing. So they actually considered starting with the Monster Manual as the first of the new books as a nod to first edition. But they decided that the gameplay would be smoother / easier if people were using the new player rules up against old monsters instead of the other way around. I don't know if I 100% agree with that, but I mean, I like that they at least gave a reason.
The logic is sound when you think about it, right? The idea that having monsters with all these brand new rules en masse is going to be more complicated and more difficult to learn than giving you a taste of it on the player side of things and then familiarizing you with that and then dropping you in the deep end later on.
I guess. I don't know. Is it more complicated to
Well, so for example, Bloodied, right? Bloodied comes up 2-3 times in the player's handbook.
Sure, yeah.
So you go, oh, well, this thing is bloody. What the fuck is this? Then you look it up, and then you can go, oh, I see. Whereas in theory, right? Big caveat with in theory.
Right.
If 50% of the monsters in the monster manual have bloodied and another ability and another thing and then another thing and then another thing, it can be a little overwhelming. And you can learn to incorporate and familiarize yourself with those things on the player side. That way the DM doesn't have to teach you all of these things. You can just go, oh, I know what this does.
Okay, I see what you're saying now. Yeah, okay. All right, you've swayed me. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Because what I was going to say is, even if I didn't 100% agree with it initially, I just like that they gave us a reason for the order of operations. I just like that they, like, because, you know, here's the thing. When it comes to design, right, you could have two absolutely expert, have been working in the field a long time designers, right? Whether it be for video games or tabletop or whatever, right? Two professionals, and they could disagree. Like, one says we should do it this way and one says we should do it this way. I don't care if they disagree, as long as they both give me a reason behind the logic of their argument, then I'm happy with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So
the fact that they explained why they did it the way they did it, I was like, that makes sense. And they also said, the last little note I have on this video is that, on the monster manual video, is that they said they felt like the design of the player's handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide would inform the monster manual more as they went through the design process.
That's what I just said. Let's go.
Oh, I guess that is kind of what you said, huh? Yeah.
Hey, dab.
Good point. Yeah. So that concept I get. My one little thing is, like, I still feel like the DMG should have been last. Still, I don't know. I still kind of wanted the DMG last.
That's, you know? Well, no, that's totally fair. It you know what it is? It's because we are sort of trained at this point to feel like it is the least relevant, because it was the least relevant for years. And
that's very true.
Assuming that they're telling the truth, and it's, I mean, we have it, so we can sort of see that it's more relevant than it was in the past, but it's, you know, it's not this pinnacle thing that they want it to be. I think even still, it is more important than it was.
Yes, I would say the 2024 DMG is much more valuable for sure. That's true. Yeah, I guess you're probably right. Yes, my assumption that it would be the least valuable book probably did make me want it the least. I also think the other reason I wanted it the least, and I guess these two things kind of go hand in hand, because I've already played the game a lot and I already know how to run the game. The book to tell me how to run the game is personally just of a lesser value to me mentally.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I guess you have an argument there. Yeah. I don't know. It's funny. I don't know. Maybe I'm just jonesing for the new monsters more than anything else. Because, as we've established, at the end of the day, Monster cool.
Monster is cool.
Monster cool. I hope Sam's proud that we still use that.
You know, I hope so. I don't think he listens to us, but I hope so.
I don't know, but I hope he still thinks about it. That's the last of the notes for the Monster Manual video. Then we have the dragon and the undead video. I'm not gonna lie, there's a lot of fluff. A lot of like, oh man, dragons and zombies are so fucking cool, dude. There's a lot of fluff nonsense in those videos. So I just pulled out the bits that I gave a shit about, which is like, I don't know, 30% of the video, to be honest. So these two will be short and sweet for the most part. So, you know, they start, the dragon video starts off and they're like, man, dragons are so fucking cool. Dragons are just, you know, dragons. And like, dragons are cool. I'm not going to argue, but like, yes, dragons are cool. We all know that. So they said dragons at a higher CR, all kind of across the board, got a general buff because they felt like at the higher levels, dragons were not really threatening enough. And I think that's probably true. Yeah. Like they were threatening enough to, like, you know, not put your players to sleep, but they weren't threatening enough to make your players really sweat. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't know. It really depends on the level, right? Because in my opinion, and this sort of does hold true, right?
Well, I assume we're talking like level 15 plus, tier 4.
Yes. Well, so I think level 15 to level 17, I think, is the ideal place to throw, assuming you have a party of 4 or 5, right? Where you're supposed to throw ancients at people because you're just below epic level to like just hitting epic level,
Yeah.
And that's when there's still going to be some threat there. But if you're full level 20 and you got your epic boons or whatever the fuck you got and your final legendary
Ancient Dragon's
weaponry,
not cutting it.
It's not, unless you do what you did, which is like big dragon and then 2 smaller Durgans, and you start playing the numbers game, because I think a lot of people just go, well, it's a dragon, it should be the final thing. And then it's just going to get dog walked.
What? When did I do that? Wait, what?
Or sorry, not dragon, but when we fought
Orcus plus dragon?
Yes. Yeah. That was way more effective because you did the smart thing and went, well, if it's just Orcus, he's going to get shit stomped.
Yes.
He's just going to get dunked on. So.
Yep. Yes. And then I will say, the aspect of Tiamat sufficiently put up a challenge, but that's a fucking mythic monster, so it's effectively 2 monsters in a way.
Yeah.
I will say, as a very slight little side note, the aspect of Tiamat stat block did way, way better than I thought it was going to.
It was pretty good. I'm
way
happy.
More dangerous than I thought.
Yeah, we were also fucking out of ammo on everything when we fought her. So
no, you weren't. You were fully topped up.
Oh, that's right. I never did. I never used the thing.
Oh, you might not have, but everyone else did.
Yeah, everyone else
did, topped up. Yeah.
I think I used it halfway through the fight when I got nailed with her stupid ass dragon breath and was like,
her breath weapon was very strong. Yeah. I was surprised. It worked a lot better than I wanted it to be the singular monster, and I was like, please work. I was hoping, and it did pretty much work out. Anyway, so yes, they buffed the higher CR dragons, which is to say, the adults and the ancients. Spell casting is now default to all the dragon stat blocks. Thank fucking Christ.
Yes, sir.
The fact that was the fact that it was ever not default is so fucking stupid.
Yeah, it was a little goofy, just a little bit.
Oh, I hate it so much. So they talked a little bit again about they mentioned lair actions, and they said they incorporated some of the lair actions to become legendary actions. I don't know exactly how this is going to shake out, but we'll see. Yeah, I'm intrigued by that. I hope it doesn't mean they got rid of lair actions completely.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I like that idea, because there are some things like the ancient red dragon just summoning the fire geysers. Mm-hmm. That is exactly what we were talking about when we said that dragon stat blocks are kind of boring because all they do is bite, claw, whack, and fire. But if they're doing fucking flame geyser from Demon Souls, you're like, shit, dude, that's kind of cool.
Yeah. And here's the thing. If that lair action, the flame geyser, has become a legendary action, that means you can use it more, which is good. But I do still want them to get special abilities in their lair. I still think that should be a thing. So I'm hoping that we have both. Right?
Yes, I agree.
We do. They did mention they get buffed in their lair, so that's a thing. They also said all of the legendary actions are supposed to be more interesting, just kind of across the board. We'll see on that one. Again, we're going to look at a stat block in a minute, so we can judge at least one of them. Kobolds are dragons now, as I mentioned. They brought that up. The half dragon and the shadow dragon are now their own stat block instead of being a template that you put on something else. Yeah, I was pretty happy about that. I do like the template thing, but I don't like the way D&D does, like the way 5e does the template. I like the idea of a template that you stick on monsters. I've never felt like 5e did it particularly well, though. You get what,
Yeah.
Like, I like that idea of like, oh, what if this is like, let's just say there was like a template to turn something into like a celestial style creature. So you made like a celestial lich. I like that idea of turning a monster into like a different thing using a template, but the templates were never very good and they were always a little confusing. And I feel like if they want to do the template thing, they should be in like a different section of the monster manual or a different book. I don't really care. Put them in their own little section and make it a more verbose system. You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, Half Dragon and Shadow Dragon are going to be their own stat block. I'm sure you could rip that stat block apart and use it as a template still. Like, I don't think that'll be particularly difficult. They talked a little bit how the dragons are going to have some new lore descriptions on how they behave at the different ages. So Wormling, what is it? Wormling, young, adult, ancient, right? Yeah.
Yes.
I don't think we're going to get any great worms in the monster manual, so if anyone was hoping for that, I would not assume that. They also said there's some so I was this little bit in this video confused me slightly. So they said there's going to be descriptions on how to use the dragons in adventures, like as adventure hooks, but I'm not exactly sure what they meant by that. It was like a little unclear. They talked about it very broad and vaguely, so I was a little unclear on what they meant exactly. So
yeah, I mean, I was also curious about that. I didn't know.
Right, it was a little unclear. Hopefully it'll be interesting, but I don't know. I don't know what that's going to look like. They didn't go into detail on that. This I like a lot. This I think is very cool. So instead of every dragon before had frightful presence, right? Mm-hmm. Now, instead of them all having frightful presence, every dragon type has their own presence type ability. Ooh. So the example they gave is red dragons have
I'm gonna say me doing the Shaquille O'Neal like ooh face.
Ooh, yeah. Ooh, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So red dragons, they said, have commanding presence. So instead of making you afraid, the red dragon like forces you to do something because red dragons are like tyrannical and oppressive. So they essentially like force you into an action you don't want to do.
That's really cool. I like that.
Yeah, so I like that a lot. That is going to be cool. I'm sure one of them is probably still going to be the one with frightful presence.
Probably white, because they're just like the brutal animals.
I was also just thinking white. Yeah.
It sounds weird being like, well, white are the weird animals, but like they literally are they're just the most savage. They're just kind of like I unga, therefore I bunga.
I unga when I bunga.
Yeah.
Yeah. They mentioned that all of the dragons get more, so they get more legendary resistances and more legendary actions when they are in their lair. So because that's a thing, I'm hoping that means that lair actions will also still be a thing. You know, those two things working together would make sense.
I would very much hope so.
Yeah. And then they mentioned all of the metallic dragons, specifically the metallics, have a damage breath attack and a non-damage breath attack. They have both.
Yes, they had done that in...
Was that the case for all of them before also?
Fizzbands and onward, yes.
Ah, okay, yeah. So they are, they're continuing with that.
Perfect.
So I'm happy about that. Yes, that's cool. And then, yes, lastly, I mentioned it before, but officially confirmed, gargantuan size has no size maximum / size ceiling.
Also like that.
Yeah. Again, that was kind of already a thing, but now Jeremy just stated it directly, so hopefully we could stop going back and forth on that one for no reason. You know?
Good, now I can make my gargantuan 20 by 20.
Yeah, exactly.
Laugh.
Literally. Yeah.
Just laugh maniacally.
Yeah, I think I did that for the aspect of Tiamat. I think I made her like 6 by 6 or something like that. Yeah. That was all the stuff I pulled out of the dragon video. Like I said, I know that was short, but like there is a lot of like, so tell me about copper dragons. Oh, that's cool. Yeah. Oh, they're so cool. There's a lot of that in the video. There's a lot of just nonsense. So I pulled out the important bits. And then we have the undead video. And once again, they start with saying why everybody loves to use undead so much. I thought this was funny because they're like, oh, I think everybody loves to use undead because, when the undead show up, the player characters are like, I know exactly what I need to do. It's time to kick some evil demon ass. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's true. That is kind of one of the reasons that our undead are fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's just evil thing, kill evil thing. So we're getting new vampires at all the CR. What the hell did I write? New vampires at new CR. I don't know what I meant by that. Okay. Whatever. So we're getting a vampire familiar at lower CR. We're getting the vampire Nightbringer, which is kind of a middle of the road vampire. I think between a spawn and a full vampire is the Nightbringer. And then we're getting a vampire Umbral Lord, which is beyond the CR of a standard vampire, which is good because standard vampire stops at CR 13, which is like kind of low.
Yeah, it's like it's just above halfway. You're like, all right.
Yeah. So we're getting a even stronger, cooler vampire, which I'm very happy about that one. They said that they took, so you know how the vampire stat block in the old monster manual had a little section in it where it talked about how you could modify the vampire stat block to make it more dangerous? Remember that little tidbit?
Yes.
Yeah. So they took stuff from that part of the monster manual and used that to make the Umbral Lord. So that sort of informed the design of the more powerful vampires. So that's fun. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then they mostly just talked about a bunch of new stat blocks. So we got the Ghast Gravecaller, which is a ghast monster with spell casting that's kind of like a mini lich. Which is fun.
Really, like, the idea of it's really interesting.
I love it because the way they talked about it, they were like, I want to use a lich in my game, but obviously a lich is way too powerful for like level 3 characters, but you can use a Ghast Gravecaller. And they even said how, like, in lore, the Ghast Gravecaller is kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? It's, like, really cocksure of itself. So the Ghast Gravecaller will pretend to be a lich because it wants to be cooler than it is.
Kind of love
so the
that.
Players could walk. So like they gave an example of like the players walk into the room and they see the Gravecaller and they think it's a lich because it's acting like it's tougher than it is. I thought that was quite funny. Then we have the Graveyard Revenant. This thing sounds awful. The Graveyard Revenant. So a Revenant is, a singular person bent on vengeance, right?
Yes.
The Graveyard Revenant, they were like, what if the entire graveyard wanted to kill you? So it's literally a giant mound of corpses fueled by rage and revenge.
That's fucking nuts.
Coming to kill you. And
it's literally the zombie apocalypse coming for you.
Yes. I was like, that's hilarious. Love
Right.
that. And then they mentioned the Haunting Revenant, which I mentioned this one in the group chat. This is what happens if a revenant spirit enters an object instead of a person. And the art example, and we actually have the stat block for this one, so we can talk about this. The art example for this thing is a house. The house is possessed by a vengeful spirit. Yes, it is literally Monster House, straight up.
God, that movie wasn't good.
No. They mentioned a swarm of crawling claws. Need I explain anything about that?
No.
That's awful. This one sounds really cool. The Death Knight Aspirant, which is a lower CR Death Knight creature that could be used as a minion for a Death Knight or just as a lower level Death Knight. I also really like that it's Death Knight Aspirant because aspirant literally just means someone who is aspiring to be cooler than they are.
Yeah, it's really funny. It's like,
it's a good
I'm
name.
gonna be a Death Knight. I'm gonna be one.
Yeah.
It's like,
I'm gonna be one, Dad. You'll see.
Oh, buddy.
So I'm hoping I'm hoping that stat block will be interesting because I like the idea of having a little like more mid CR Death Knight. And then once again, they got rid of an old template. The Dracolich is now its own stat block and has its own sick new art. So, big fan of that one. Because the Dracolich is a fucking awesome idea that, you know, kind of was... It was okay before, but now hopefully it'll be better.
Yeah.
And then they mentioned the Flaming Skeleton. It's a skeleton that's on fire, and it explodes. It's a magic skeleton.
Mm-hmm.
What else do I need to tell you?
It seems like it's the... And then they explodes into snakes.
Yes, a little bit. So that's what we got for all the videos. Now, Isaiah, if you scroll all the way to the top of the notes here, you'll see I have some stat blocks for us to take a look at.
Yes.
So I think we should take a look at this ancient gold dragon and, you know, compare a little here. Let me just say, by the way, because since we were literally just talking about organization, I fucking love the way the new stat blocks look.
Yes, I like that the stats have taken up a lot smaller space.
Yes. Significantly less space, and the way that they have modifier and save next to each other, I love that. I like that we have now traits, actions, bonus actions, legend, everything's broken up nicely so that I can see traits, which are the passive things, and then actions and bonus actions. Love that, love all that. And if they have reactions as their own thing.
So you know what's funny about the traits thing is that I always feel like the traits thing being next to the stat block rather than being directly underneath its stats was always a weird choice, because that's where the passives are for players, right? That's where their proficiencies and shit are. It's directly underneath their stat section.
Yeah. Oh, you're saying because the traits were on the right side before?
They used to be on the right side, yeah.
Yes.
So you often confuse those with actions when they are not in fact actions. Now they are underneath, and it just flows a lot better.
Yes, I do see what you're saying. Yeah. That's funny. I didn't even think about that, but you're right. Yeah. So this gold dragon stat block. So they show D&D Beyond has an ancient gold dragon stat block that you can go look at. It's called Preview the New Stat Block Design in the 2024 Monster Manual. It's the 2025 Monster Manual. Don't let them forget it. Anyway.
That's crazy.
I don't know what you're talking about. It's
wild, dog.
I was right. Don't forget it. Anyway. So yeah, we have this new stat block layout. You know, we have the stats and everything for the ancient gold dragon. Whatever, stats are stats. It's numbers. Nothing exciting. One little thing I will note is that if you fight the gold dragon, presumably this will apply to all the dragons. If you fight them in their lair, you actually get more XP than if you fight them out of their lair. So I like that. That's cool.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah.
It says it right there. I probably should have, but
I mean, if you're not looking at the XP values, you wouldn't. It's a tiny little thing. As mentioned, so the ancient gold dragon has 4 legendary resistances in a day, 5 if they're in their lair, so they get 1 extra one. They have multi-attack, so they can make 3 rend attacks. It can replace 1 attack with a use of spell casting to cast guiding bolt, or its weakening breath. So you can attack and cast a spell, or attack and use your breath weapon. Cool, sick, nice. They took the tail, the bite, and the claw attack and just smushed them all into the rend attack, which I don't know about you. I personally am 100% on board with that, because quite frankly, I really hate how a lot of monsters in 5e have different attacks that essentially do nothing different other than use slightly different damage dies.
I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. I go back onto what I had said last time we had talked about dragons, which is I liked that dragons often had a stronger and weaker attack, because you could use that to sort of auto balance your own games. You know, if the wizard can only take 2 bites, you hit it with 3 tails, which gives them, in theory, a chance to either regroup or heal. That might not seem like a lot, but I always thought it was useful and fun.
Yeah, I guess that's a thing. I mean, This does kind of go into what they were saying, though, about making it so that you can't choose the unoptimal option, right?
Ooh.
So, yeah, pros and cons on both sides. I always found the annoyance of having a bunch of attacks that did basically the same shit. I always found that annoying. So consolidating those attacks into a similar attack, I'm okay with. The one thing I wish they would have done is where it sends rend, it says slashing damage. I wish it said slashing, piercing, or bludgeoning, your choice, right? Because fictionally, and this doesn't matter that much because 5e doesn't use damage typing a ton, but fictionally, I like the idea of the claw attack is slashing damage, the bite attack is piercing damage, and the tail attack is bludgeoning damage, right? So if the rend attack just said you can choose which damage type, then I could make it so that the type of attack and the damage type line up. Granted, I could just do that anyway, right? I could just fictionally say, he hit you with your tail, it's bludgeoning damage. Like, I could just do that anyway, but I would still like to have seen that. The Gold Dragon has a Fire Breath attack that works, which, like you would expect, it recharges on a 5 or 6, blah, blah, blah. They just reworded it, or not even really reworded it. They just made it a little more clear what happens if you succeed the save and fail the save. Again, as we said, the organization's a lot better, so it's a lot more clear where it says failure and success, what happens on the two outcomes.
So I had a quick question for you. So I remember early on when we talked about monsters in general, you said you didn't really like when they just list magic, like they just list spells on the sheet.
I don't, yes.
They haven't changed that. Have your thoughts changed at all?
No, I still would do it differently, but I understand that they have a certain philosophy for how they want monsters to work, so I just accept that.
Fair enough.
Like for me, so it's like, okay, so they gave the Gold Dragon has spellcasting, and they gave it Detect Magic and Guiding Bolt at will, and the Shape Change spell at will. The shape change thing is kind of what I'm talking about, right? So shape change on the old stat block used to be an ability that specifically said how it worked, right? It said, you know, the Gold Dragon can use an action to assume, you know, to assume a human form, blah, blah, blah. It was an ability on the stat block itself. It wasn't the shape change spell, quote unquote, right? It was called change shape and it was its own ability. Yeah. I prefer that kind of design where the monster has an ability and the ability is explained in the stat block. I don't like the thing that 5e does where they list a bunch of spells and then you have to go reference the spell somewhere else. I'm not a fan of that.
Gotcha.
But I understand that they have basically decided that's how they want monsters to function. They want monsters to be beholden to the same kind of spells that players are. For the most part, they sometimes break their rule on that every once in a while.
Like the weird wizard dude who just has infinite fireballs because it's not actually fireball.
Yes. Or like the Archdruid stat block, which has an ability called Wildfire, which is not a spell. It's just like a fire range spell attack thing they can do. So sometimes they do it the way I'm talking about, but sometimes they don't. Little weird, but I don't know. They were trying stuff out. I think probably in the future they're going to mostly stop doing that. I do like that they've did the thing where they sit, instead of just having a bunch of spell slots and listing out a shitload of spells, now they just say, like the Gold Dragon, for example, once per day can cast Flame Strike at level 6, Word of Recall, and Zone of Truth. And they just say you can cast each of these once a day. That cleans up the stat block a lot. So I'm happier with how they're doing it now because it's essentially a little bit of a middle ground between what I'm saying and what they want to do. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So, yeah. I'm okay with the middle ground. It's not how I would do it, but I can accept it as the middle ground. So we mentioned that all the metallics have 2 breath weapons. We can see clearly the ancient gold dragon has a fire breath and a weakening breath. Their weakening breath is a DC 24 strength save, and basically it gives you disadvantage on strength-based D20 tests and subtracts 1d10 from damage rolls. I really like that it subtracts from your damage rolls. Like thematically, that feels really cool. Like the mechanics and the theming of a weakening breath is lining up in a way that I really like there.
Yeah.
Actually, come to think of it, how did that work before?
I don't know.
I'm gonna pull that up real quick. Hold on. Let's see. Weakening breath. Each creature must make a DC 24 strength save or have disadvantage on strength-based attack rolls, strength checks, and strength saving throws for 1 minute. The creature can repeat the save at the end of its turn. So it didn't affect their damage, and they had to do that thing where they listed out all 3 of the saves, whereas now we have the phrase D20 test, so we know that it applies to all 3 saves. Again, another example. They've gotten so much better at organization.
So much better. It's crazy.
Yeah, another great example right here. So I like that it subtracts damage. It still affects all the strength saves. I also like the wording here is kind of interesting. So the creature repeats the save at the end of each of its turns, ending the effect on itself on a success. After 1 minute, it succeeds automatically. I think that's new language that they weren't really doing before.
No, because the old language was the effect ends after 1 minute.
Was that even in there?
I don't know if that specific example, but across the board, it was usually said like.
So the weakening breath for the old ancient gold dragon says strength saving throws for it affects all the saves for 1 minute. A creature can repeat the save at the end of each of its turn. So it's similar, but it's just a better wording, I guess, is just what it is. Mm-hmm. Which again, still good. And then their legendary actions. So they have 3. They are significantly more interesting than they used to be. So for context, what the legendary actions of a gold dragon before were detect, which is the dragon makes a perception check. That was a legendary action. Who the fuck is ever going to use that? That's fucking lame. Tail attack, which is it makes an attack. Or wing attack, which is it makes a slightly different attack. That's what it did before. So now, it can banish you. You just goodbye. You're banished as a legendary action. So you end your turn and then he puts you in the meat dimension. He can shoot guiding bolt at you as a legendary action, or he can move up to half his speed and make an attack on you. So not just make an attack, but also get closer and make an attack. So I will say, they said they wanted to make all the legendary actions more interesting. For the gold dragon, mission accomplished. Mm-hmm. These are cooler, for sure. Also, the big thing is, did you notice all of them cost 1 action?
I did not notice that.
Yeah, so legendary actions, the way they used to work was if you had 3, it was like ammo, right? You had 3 uses, and some abilities would cost 1, 2, or 3 uses of your legendary action. So if you used a really big one, it would use up all of them. Now they all cost 1.
I don't know. I liked the previous version. I liked that because they cost more legendary actions, you could make the big ones huge.
You could, but think about it this way. Now you could just use this more. You know?
Yeah,
like you can banish the PCs 3 turns in a row. Right? Like that's kind of hilarious.
I mean that's kind of it's hilarious, but that gets like kind of busted if you banish.
It's a 1 turn
3
banish.
Of a 6. Yeah, it is, but that's like if you banish the healer and the tank, and then you've got
right, but this goes
squishy wizards.
Keep in mind, this goes back to them saying they wanted to make shit, more threatening, right? So I think that.
Yeah, I think there's a balance. I think this can be easily abused if you're not careful. Not even purposefully. I mean, like I'm not saying your GM is trying to fuck you. I'm saying it might if it's not used carefully, feel a little cheap against the players, you know?
Maybe. I don't know. I think players have enough ways to respond to shit like this that I wouldn't be too concerned. Like, at high level, when you're going to be fighting an ancient gold dragon, for example, I think you have enough responses as an option that I think you can manage. Especially because you even have more responses than you used to in some ways. Right, like, because again, remember, players are quite a bit more powerful than they used to be.
They are, yes.
I like that they all cost 1 point now, because sometimes, here's the thing, right? With legendary actions, it's homework, right? At the end of the day, legendary actions are something you have to keep track of in a certain fashion. And the fact that the different legendary actions had different costs was sometimes, like, for me personally, I remember having a hard time going, okay, which legendary action did I use last turn? Oh, I used the one that cost 2, so I only have 1, so I can't use this one, I have to use that. Like, sometimes that was hard to remember. So knowing that I used a legendary action last turn, I have 2 more, and I can use whichever ones I want, makes that bookkeeping easier on me. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
This kind of, honestly, in a way, it kind of goes back to one of the reasons I liked the idea of the multiple reactions is because the ammo count thing I wouldn't have to worry about as much. So if they're changing that anyway, all right, you're kind of meeting me in the middle a little bit, you know?
Yeah, I suppose.
So I like that. I like that they all cost 1. And you could still have really big abilities that cost multiple, potentially. Probably won't, but, you know, it's still on the table. Or you as a GM could come up with a really big ability and then decide it costs more if you wanted. Like, that's not particularly hard. Oh, and also, as we mentioned before, well, the dragons in their... So they have 3 legendary actions. They get 4 in their lair. So they get an extra 1 in their lair. So, like, looking at this gold dragon stat block, I mean, I'm pretty much happy across the board. I don't really have any complaints. I have complaints about the whole legendary action situation, but ignoring that and just looking at this stat block as is, I'm pretty happy with the execution of it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any?
No. I mean, I don't have an issue with the execution at all. I think the only real thing I'm kind of like about is the legendary action thing, but that's really about it. Like, everything else you said, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Like, it's organized much better. I kind of liked having different attacks that you can use to sort of gauge things out and sort of prod your players and see what they can deal with. But I understand why they've shortened it, and it does, in theory, work better, you know, like, rather than having to worry about, oh, well, the bite only has 15 range and the tail has 20, now everything has 15, so you just go with that number instead.
Yeah. I mean, also, you can pretty easily be like, I'll give them a tail attack and just say the tail attack does 2 damage dice less or something, like, you know.
You could, yeah, but that goes back to what I'm saying about what I said about codifying things, like, you know?
I think, like, yeah, but I think the thing is most people were not doing what you were saying. I think what ended up happening is most people either were confused by the multiple attacks or only you picked one attack and just kept using it, you know?
Potentially, yeah.
Like, I don't think people were using it the way you were using it. I think you found a good use for it, like a use case scenario that a lot of other people either didn't key in on or just didn't care. You know?
That's possible, yeah.
But yeah, I do see, I see what you mean. They also, if anyone's curious, you can go on D&D Beyond's Twitter, and they have shown a couple of stat blocks. I just real quickly want to mention the Haunting Revenant because this thing is very funny. So The haunting revenant reminder is the revenant spirit trapped in an object. So the example they gave is a house. So this thing's CR 10, so it's, decently strong. Haunted zone. You have to make a DC 17 con save. Any creature that casts a spell inside the revenant space, this goes off. If they fail, the spell fails and is wasted. So this thing just has a permanent counter spell. It has undead restoration like the other revenants. So if it dies, it comes back 24 hours later. It has an object slam attack, which can either be melee or ranged, which is like, okay, sure, yep. And then it has an ability called Invitation. You make a charisma save, DC 17. Each creature in a 60-foot cone. If they fail, the target is teleported inside the revenant space and swallowed.
I didn't notice that it said it teleported, dude. That's nuts.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I must have just skimmed that over because in my head I was like, oh yeah, it's like does the ooky spooky shit. Then literally the fucking monster house where you see the tricycle inside the house, then you walk in and die. I didn't notice that it just teleports you.
It zooks you in. It gives you the suck and you come into the house.
It gives you the suck. That's crazy.
A swallowed creature has total cover against attacks and other effects outside the revenant. Well, the revenant has any hit points. A swallowed creature can leave the revenant's space only by using magic that enables planar travel, such as the plane shift spell. So, yeah, this thing's kind of crazy.
It's a little cracked.
It eats you, and then you have to plane shift out. That is your only option. You are in a dimensional pocket inside its stomach.
I do kind of wish it would tell you what happened. You can assume that you just leave when it dies, but it doesn't tell you that. It
doesn't specify. It doesn't say that.
I think they should specify that.
They probably should, actually. You're good. That's a good point. They probably should specify. It also doesn't say you can necessarily attack it from the inside, but I assume you can.
I mean, it says you're in a different plane. Like,
That's a good point, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
A swallowed creature has total cover against attacks and other effects outside the revenant. Huh. Yeah. I would assume you could attack it from the inside.
Well, because it's not like a swallow, right? Where it doesn't say you're in the thing's stomach.
True.
If you can't, that would really suck. You just have to not play the game.
Yeah, I somehow don't think so. I feel like
someone should probably at Jawcraw or any of the others on your social media platform of choice. Yeah.
Yeah. Can I attack the house? That's funny. That's the new deets on monsters. There's a couple other stat blocks, but they're not as important necessarily.
Yeah, they're not as cool. I mean, that's not true. Maybe not as cool. That's not
the Imperium iota. I actually liked quite a bit.
I haven't actually had. Oh, let me take a look at that real quick.
It's a fun one.
Oh, I've seen its art. Oh god, it's so cool, and its shoes.
The art.
Wait, Empyrean is supposed to be humongous. Why is she tiny?
Yeah. I don't know. I think the idea is this is like a follower of an Empyrean.
I mean, I guess she's an iota, like the smallest possible version of a thing. So she's just a pygmy Empyrean. That's kind of funny.
Something like that, yeah.
Incorporeal movement, okay. Otherworldly strike, all right, that's cool. Spellcasting, lesser resto, healing. Simple, yeah. I mean, it's not crazy. It's simple, but it's cool.
Yeah.
It'd be a good ally to have in a fight.
I will say also, actually, the Vampire Familiar stat block has a really cool ability where they can telepathically talk and communicate all of their senses to their Vampire Master. As long as they're on the same... Well, the Familiar and its Vampire Master are on the same plane of existence, so distance doesn't matter. The Vampire can communicate with the Familiar telepathically, and the Vampire can perceive through the Familiar's senses. Thought that was pretty sick.
I really like the idea of the Vampire listening in and being like, okay, what are they doing now? And because the Familiar got banished, they're like, hello?
Hello?
Are you okay?
Ah, shit.
What's going on? Are you dead? And then he comes over, he's like, no, I'm good. I got plane shifted. I'm all right.
Fine, they just put me in a box.
Thank God.
Yeah.
They stuck me in the bag of holding. Oh, they did that to you too? That's crazy.
That's crazy. So yeah, I'm pretty intrigued by what we're looking at with the new monster stat boxes. Stat boxes? What? Stat blocks.
It's been both of us today. It's all right, bud.
I'm sure I will be disappointed in some regards where I was hoping for more and get less than I wanted, but what we've seen so far, most of it, I'm like, yes, this is for the most part pretty good stuff. I still want them to utilize resistance and vulnerabilities more, but I don't think that's ever that would require a 6th edition, I think. So
I mean, yeah. I don't know. I think they could have done it. We're getting shit like bloodied back. That's like pretty monumental, like mechanics shifting. I'm gonna be honest. We absolutely could have gotten a revamp or a completely revitalization of vulnerabilities and resistance.
Yeah, they're just.
I'm gonna be kind of pissed. I'm not gonna lie.
I mean, we didn't. We definitely didn't. We know at this point.
I guess. I mean, we've seen a couple monsters that have it, or have or not.
We didn't see any kind of revamp of the system itself. So we're seeing it get used a little bit more because we took out the concept of magical damage, but we're definitely not getting like. We're not getting a whole new in-depth system of it for sure. I think to really make a cool system of like vulnerability and resistances, you would need to really look at the whole game, and I think they just weren't willing to do it on that level,
Yeah.
Especially given the whole backwards compatibility thing. So.
Yeah, I guess.
That's where we're at.
All right, bud, you want to take us home?
Yeah, I mean, this has been us. You may follow us on Twitter, and, I'll just say, without spoiling things, maybe be excited for next week. Get ready. Tune in. It's so gonna be a good one. It's gonna be a good one. Get excited. Maybe I'll say what's happening on Twitter a little bit before it comes out. I don't know. I haven't decided yet.
I haven't. Yeah. So I haven't even told Paladin about it.
Okay. Well,
he knows. No one knows anything.
Yeah. Well, no, that's good. Just in case.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't jinx anything.
No, I won't. But yeah.
So yeah.
Oh no! Wait. No, I told Matt. That's about it.
Okay. Next
That's
week,
fine.
y'all.
It's just Matt.
Next week.
He didn't watch us anymore. It's fine.
All right. Goodbye.
Peace, motherfuckers.